Oh man, I remember back when my hair used to behave. But anyhow, hey there! Max here. Before we get started with anything, I want to let you know one thing. This week's videos, starting on Friday, because my week always starts on Friday, are gonna be a little bit on the shorter side. Max said, probably before rambling for like 20 minutes about one particular very straightforward subject. I'm very busy this week. I'm very busy this week. Welcome back to another episode of the struggle between B's and V's. What it's like to be a non-native English speaker in America. Either way. Yeah, shorter videos this week, mostly just because I'm really busy and a lot of life stuff's happening and I would rather give you short videos than no videos altogether. Anyhow, let's take it from the top. Today's subject was a question sent via viewer just like you. And today I'm going to be talking about the idea of researching for a novel. How long does it take me to research everything I need to know for a particular project? Do I do it before jumping in? Do I do it as I go? Do I wait until later to fix everything? It's a little bit of every column, so let's dive right in. The reason why I really like this question is because it's the kind of question that comes back, and it's fine. I don't mind rephrasing my thoughts, especially because it's been like 3 years since the time I did that one video. I think it was one of my very first videos on this channel, and it was like a PowerPoint slideshow. Oh god, don't go back. Don't look at those. Those are really bad. But how much research is enough? And how do I go about doing things? Because remember, the following is merely just my advice, my opinion, and what works for me. Don't take it as gospel. Instead, take it as the ramblings of a silly person who looks a little bit like this. I'm so out of it. I forgot to put Slowpoke on my shoulder. Alright, now that everything is fine with the universe, let's talk about research and what I do. Because I'm the sort of person, and I've talked about this in the past, but like the outlining phase, the beginning where you're planning where the novel's gonna go, what it's gonna be, what the characters are gonna do, that stuff used to be a time vampire for me. I would spend all of my time doing that, and up to an extent, I'm honest enough where I can admit this about myself. I would use outlining and research as a way to procrastinate, not actually doing the scary thing. The most scary thing of all, which is actually writing the darn thing. So as I wrote more stories, or rather as I got tired of not writing stories and not actually finishing anything, I ended up just cutting away at that. Because again, I'm a very like straightforward, honest person, and I can look at myself and go, I'm just procrastinating, aren't I? So I made fixes to that. I started just looking at myself and going, do I need to research every possible thing that could happen in this book? And the answer is no. I don't research everything that I think I'm going to need to know. I only research the stuff that I know I have to know about. The stuff for which I have immediate questions about. For instance, for the book that by the time this video goes up, I have already finished writing it. It deals with missing people. So during the planning phases of the story, I did a bunch of Google searches, looked at various sources. Key point here: you want to look at different sources. And I looked at information regarding what happens when someone goes missing. What does the police do? What can the police do? And just to give myself a frame of mind. And I think it was the exact same process for Justine's Blood, where I needed to know what it was like to be in a mental hospital. And I actually knew people who like had worked at places like that, so like they gave me just tons of information, as well as things I just looked up on the internet. But it really just boiled down to that. During the planning phases, I pretty much I only research the things that I know I have to know, or at least I have to be aware of before I jump into the story. Now you may be saying, Max, that sounds nice, but what if something comes up? What if something comes up that you couldn't have predicted? What do you do then? Well, I think it generally falls into two categories. If I'm in the middle of writing, and note that my advice that I made for myself, or rather my technique, I guess, or the way that I approach this particular situation, is that I get what I need to know and I start writing, because as always, the sooner I start writing, the sooner I will finish the book. And so that's why I don't really wait for second thoughts to come in and be like, well, we should also research about this. We should also research about that. I like to just start running. But there are situations that happen in which, in the middle of writing, chapter 2, 3, 4, halfway through the story, in the climax of the story, I realize something. A particular situation in which I may not have all of the background for, I may not have all the information I need to know. And generally, I take one of two options right at that very moment. I either A, if it's something so great and immediately meaningful to what I'm doing, as an example, if this will affect what is going to be happening next in the story, I pause and I actually go and research it on the spot. I give myself like 20 minutes, which usually tends to be enough for smaller things that can change direction. Again, because all of the big things I've already researched. All the big things, like how do missing people cases work, or how does a mental hospital work, I've researched all of those things already. So that's one scenario. I either A, research it on the spot, just so that I already know what I need to do. I hate doing this because I hate stopping in the middle of writing, but it has to be like a sizable situation. Generally, though, what I do, I make a note of my question. I literally make a note either on the actual text file or on my notepad where I have all the notes for the particular revision process, and I keep moving. I can tell you from personal experience, there hasn't been any small detail that I couldn't just revise later during the act of revision. Like, I know that it can seem incredibly daunting and also scary to jump into a story without having all of the answers, but as always, I just want to kind of remind you that your characters will kind of help you along the way, and you have to also be aware that a couple of the pitfalls regarding research is that research cannot give you the scope of every situation imaginable. So, because the fear usually with doing research is that you don't want anyone to show up at a book signing and be like, excuse me, you did this wrong. Excuse me, you made a mistake here. And of course, these are all nightmare scenarios that are never gonna happen. But you don't want to be caught wrong. And that's completely fair. The issue, though, is that life is weird. Life is bizarre, you could say. And it's impossible to encapsulate everything into one particular scenario or one particular research document. That's why a lot of sources help. But even then, you can't predict everything. And you also can't predict the way things are going to change later on. And one more thing. Because I feel that the fear of being wrong is completely understandable. Nobody wants to be wrong. But I think that focusing on that and trying to solve it with more research tends to overlook our amazing ability as humans to think our way out of problems. I can assure you that as long as you do the research for the big questions, any little question that may pop along the way can easily be solved, fixed, accommodated for during the act of revision. Never underestimate your ability to find a way around problems. The exact same way you would revise to fix a plot hole in the story, or you would revise to fix a character motivation. It is the exact same principle. It is the act of reviewing the story, checking what works and what doesn't, and making sure that you create the best story possible. So now, to directly tackle the question that was asked to me. How long does it take me to do research for a novel? I have to add the caveat that I have not written a story that requires a lot on a particular historical point of view. Like, I haven't written a historical novel where I actually need to know the events of a particular point in time. But generally, during the act of outlining, I spend several hours gathering research from multiple points of view to make sure that I don't only have one mouth's worth of information, but rather several. In the situation of the missing persons research, I wanted to know the police force point of view, as well as people who have gone missing and stories of missing people. Not only as a point of reference, but also as a point for ideas, because learning from others and seeing their experiences can also give us ideas for stuffs. I don't want to discredit research, because research is important. But from my point of view, from my experience, I remember spending days upon weeks gathering all the information, getting lost in Wikipedia because I was afraid of sitting down to write. And again, if you have the information for the big things, I can assure you you can find a way to fix all the little problems, as with anything else in revision. thank you for tagging along. I hope that this answer helped, and I hope that if anything I gave you another point of view. As we're rolling now towards the formal outro, I want to let you know that there's a few links on the screen right now, and in the description down below there's a bunch more links. Like for instance, a link to my novel planning guide. It's got like 40k views now. That's crazy. That novel planning guide is my favorite video that I've ever made, and it's kind of a product of love. So if you've been wondering how I go about planning a novel, there you go. There's also a link to my Patreon, as well as a link to where you can buy me a cup of coffee. One-time donation, I would really appreciate it. And now, as we're in the formal outro, up here, playlist, over 200 writing advice videos. Up here, button to subscribe. Over here, my Patreon, and over here in this corner is a link to my other channel with my best friend Kitty, where we are very, very, very silly people. Thank you for tagging along. Thank you for spending a little bit of your day with me. And I hope to see you on the next one.